everyone, happy Friday. It's Insta Live on Fry. It's Audrey Button from Safe Harbors of the Finger Lakes. I use the pronoun she, her, hers. And today we are going to have a discussion on trauma and how it impacts the brain. So I know we talked about trauma last week, so hopefully you checked out the video or you're watching it live last week as well, and because that will kind of go into the discussion for today. So before I get going, I always like to give a content warning, as some of the material I'll be discussing may be sensitive to some, so please take care of yourself however you need to. And I always give a disclaimer as well. The views and opinions expressed in this video are not necessarily those of Safe Harbors of the Finger Lakes, but of those in the video. And with that, I also like to remind people it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and Foster Care Awareness Month. So those topics, those awareness months all tie into our topics for this month. So just a reminder, there'll be 2 more Fridays after this for the month of May. So next week we'll be discussing violence against Asian and Pacific Islander people specifically. And then the last Friday of the month, we'll be discussing foster care children and the risk of human trafficking. So definitely check those out when they are coming around the next couple of Fridays. So with that, we'll go ahead and get in our discussion today. So like I said, we're going to talk about trauma and the impact on the brain. So specifically, we'll talk about like brain development and then things that result from the trauma on the brain specifically, and then we'll talk about resilience as well. So I like to know, so if you remember from last week, we talked about where trauma stems from, how people experience trauma, and that's important to remember for this discussion today. So when that chronic stress is experienced, the body's making more cortisol. So cortisol is that stress hormone. It's produced in the adrenal glands. It's best known for your body's fight or flight response. So it's a hormone produced during that fight or flight response. So their body's making more cortisol than it has the chance to release. So those high levels of cortisol wear down the brain's ability to function properly. So some examples of what could happen with those high levels of cortisol due to chronic stress or chronic trauma experience from somebody, or somebody experiences, I should say. There's a disruption in that synapse regulation. So synapses are primarily known for the helping of the formation of memory in our brains. So it's disrupting that regulation. So it's probably disrupting the formation of memories. So this is killing brain cells, and it's reducing the size of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex. So that part of the brain's responsible for memory and learning. So it's reducing the size of that part of the brain, and it's increasing the size of the amygdala. So the amygdala makes the brain more receptive to stress. That's where the stress response occurs in the brain. So there's that constant fight or flight response. Even if there isn't a threat, there's a perceived threat. There's things that cause a trigger that reminds them of the traumatic event. So there's just a constant fight or flight kind of occurring in the brain over and over and over again. So chronic stress, this leads to health issues down the road, such as obesity, diabetes, depression, STDs, heart disease, stroke, COPD, cancer, broken bones, suicide attempts, and so forth. So oftentimes people experiencing chronic stress develop unhealthy coping mechanisms. So that can also contribute to those health issues down the road. These unhealthy coping mechanisms are used to help deal with that chronic stress or trauma that they're experiencing. So it's a quick fix, an easy fix for them to deal with their stress. So, unhealthy coping mechanisms might include unsafe sex, alcohol, drugs, smoking, over or under eating, and so forth. Anything that's a very quick fix to stress in that moment, it can also contribute to those chronic health issues later in life. So, stress has been shown to change someone's epigenetic profile. So there's a lot of research around this still, and basically what it means is that life experiences changes our genes. So it's changing the genetic profile in somebody, and the way your body responds to stress can be passed down from one generation to the next through our genes. If you remember last time I talked about generational trauma, that's something that could happen and occur. Even if it wasn't specifically you who are experiencing trauma, you might have experienced trauma through your family. If there's, something that traumatically happened to maybe a grandparent or a great-grandparent, and that was really difficult, and that was passed down from one generation to the next, it's very possible. Not to be negative the whole time, people are resilient, which is important to recognize, especially with children, because brain development is extremely important during your youth. So young people especially, like I said, doesn't mean adults can't be resilient, because they can be, but young people especially have malleable neural circuits. So that means their brain is pretty malleable in the sense that it can be, in a way, they're resilient, so they can kind of bounce back from this. So plasticity or neuroplasticity is when neural pathways are able to reform in the brain. So we talked about how they're losing those neural pathways with the chronic stress. They can rebuild those through healthy coping mechanisms and a healthy environment to help them come back from this. So people can recover and heal from high levels of stress and trauma by some great examples include building a support system. Oftentimes, these people don't have good support systems. So really, even if it's a couple people that have it's consistent, they're there for them, or they're at least able to find someone that can help them in that moment. Support systems are extremely important for people who are experiencing chronic stress. Healthy coping mechanisms and skills. So instead of those quick fixes to stress like drugs, alcohol, unsafe sex, etc., you're helping them develop good coping mechanisms. So exercise, yoga, mindful activities, meditation, breathing exercises, anything like that that's going to help them deal with their stress in a healthy way. So if they're able to explore those healthy coping mechanisms, then they're able to work on those and know that they should use those instead of those quick fixes to stress. So then make sure they know where the resources are available and that there are resources to help them with their different needs due to that chronic stress. So maybe they do have some health issues. They're struggling with depression, they're struggling with obesity, or so they're able to access those resources to help them with those health issues. And then increase self-efficacy. So self-efficacy, it's a mouthful. The belief in one's own abilities. So you're increasing the belief in their own abilities, because a lot of times they don't believe in themselves. A lot of times they've had people tell them they can't do something, or they're not good enough, or they've been in an environment that wasn't just very supportive in general. So they tend to not believe in their own abilities. So increase, build up that self-esteem. Make them confident in their own abilities. Find something that they're good at or passionate about that's going to make them feel really good. And just in general, just being empathetic, acknowledging their trauma and their struggle, and let them know that you hear them, you support them, you're here for them, you believe them, and that can really go a long way. Sometimes people just want to be listened to, and I've told you all this so many times, but honestly, just listening to them could really change, how they're handling everything, and that someone believes them. So just be a good support system. I know you're only one person and you can't do everything. So obviously if it's too much to help somebody that's going through stuff like this, point them in the right direction. Just let them know that, hey, I'm here for you, but I don't know how I can support you. But I know somebody who can, or, I'm here for you. I don't know how to support you. Just let me know what I can do. And that can really go a long way. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And remember, we have 2 more Fridays after this, so make sure you tune in and have a great weekend. Thank you.